Welcome back to part 2 of the Vimshottari Nakshatra Dashas course. If you missed the first 12 videos where we covered the Mahadashas of each planet individually, looking over Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra and what Parashara has to say about these particular dashas and how to interpret them, please go back and review that. We're going to be looking at houses and house lords because each planet rules over a house and each planet goes into a house. And so as we're looking at dashas and as we're looking at the timing of events, we need to consider, number one, is this a Venus dasha? Is this a moon dasha? That's going to give us the general tone of what to experience during that time period. Secondarily, we need to look at what house does this planet rule over and what house does it go into. This helps us see the specifics of what to expect based on your chart, which is why you can't quite say, I'm in this dasha, this moon dasha, so therefore this is going to happen for everybody, because that planet's going to rule over a different house in everyone's chart, and it's going to be placed in a different situation in everyone's chart. Before we get into the houses specifically, and as we do this, whereas previously we used Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, we're going to be looking at Sarvarta Chintamani, what is spoken of in that text. We need to consider general chart interpretation first. Now this is something that's complex and deep. It's something that we're going to get some basics here in this video, but I'd like to encourage you to go back on this channel, youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology, and review the free Vedic Astrology 52 video session to get a sense of how to interpret a chart or the principles of chart interpretation on a much larger scale. Also, I'd like to encourage you to visit AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, and if you go to the MP3 audio and video courses section, you'll see all kinds of courses on how to interpret a chart, specifically with the Navamsha, the Dasamsha, the Vimshottari Dasha, a step-by-step course, Lajatati Avashtas, some basic courses, astrological principles 1, 2, and 3. All these things are important to help you fully get the benefit of this particular topic that we're going over, because you have to know how to read a chart before you can really understand what's going to be promised by the dashas, what the possible trends are. But for those of you who are already up to speed, we'll go ahead and begin. So a few principles. First of all, you need to be able to understand the afflictions and the advantages indicated within the chart. What's a general way of doing this? Well, you need to look at the house that you're considering. You need to look at the lord of the house. You need to look at the sign that you're considering. And if there are multiple influences pointing towards the negative, let's just say that there are separating factors pointing towards the third house, there are malefic planets, Rashi aspect in the third house, and let's say the third lord is hemmed in between malefics, or the third lord is in bad dignity, or with an enemy, that can show you that that house is going to have some disadvantages to it. It's going to have some afflictions that you're going to have to work through. If, on the other hand, you see that the third house is tenanted by benefics, is Rashi aspected by benefics, the third lord is associated with benefics, being delighted by its friends through Lajatati Avashtas, that's going to tell you that the dasha of the third house lord, that the third house itself is going to have some advantages. It's going to have some strengths to it that are going to come out naturally. Now, most people are somewhere in between, okay? So there's not usually just all good or all bad. There's going to be some differences. And when we're looking at dashas, when you're in, say, the third lord period, and you see in the sub-cycle there is a planet which is difficult, a malefic influencing that third lord, or an enemy influencing that third lord, then you can predict that that particular aspect of the dasha might not necessarily be so supportive. When you get into a dasha cycle where you have, if we're talking about Mars, and say Mars is the third lord, and let's say Mars is with Jupiter, well, when you go into a Mars-Jupiter cycle, that Mars-Jupiter cycle is going to do better. Let's say the Sun is delighting Mars because the Sun is friendly towards Mars. Then when you go into a Mars-Sun cycle, that's going to support that third lord. That's going to support that Mars. So this is how you have to start looking at dashas, not just what is the Mahadasha that I am in, but what are the planets influencing the house lord under consideration? And how can I interpret that in regards to the timing of this dasha? And I'd like to encourage you to please, if you can, go check out the Vimshottari course at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com. We spent a lot of time looking at transits, looking at breaking down each dasha with example charts. So that can help give you a little more understanding in regards to what we're going to be covering in the second section of this Nakshatra Vimshottari Dasha course. Now that's just one point. So get that point first. Write it down, memorize it, think about it, contemplate it, look at charts in this regard. Let's move on to the second point. So the intensity of the affliction or the advantage is determined by the intensity, strength, and number of planets influencing the area of life in question. What does that mean? Well, let's say we're still talking about the third lord, or the third house. If we have really strong benefic planets supporting that third house, then the advantage is going to be stronger. If we have really strong malefic planets influencing that third lord of the third house, then the disadvantage or the affliction is going to be stronger. But again, usually it's a combination of the two. And how can we interpret that by dasha? Let's think about this. Well, it may be that you're in a Mars dasha. Mars rules the third house. And let's say that Mars is getting starved by Mercury, and that Mercury is exalted. So that's a strong starvation towards Mars. That means when you go into the Mars-Mercury cycle, that's going to be one of the worst periods for the Mars cycle. But on the other hand, let's again say that maybe the Moon or Jupiter is strong in their own sign somehow, impacting this Mars, maybe through Rashi aspects. Then when you get into that Mars-Moon or Mars-Jupiter period, you're going to experience greater advantage, greater support to that third house, and greater support to that Mars. So this is how we need to start considering the ups and the downs within a dasha. And it's by weighing the afflictions towards the planet in question, to the house in question, as well as weighing the strengths and advantages towards that same planet, that same house. Now it's 2 steps, 2 points. You can also consider the influence to the appropriate karaka. Now karakas, these are indicators. So now Mars happens to be a natural karaka of the third house. But if, say, Mercury was the lord of the third house, we would do everything we just said except in relationship to Mercury. But then on top of that, we would go look at what's Mars up to, what's going on with Mars, because that's going to tie together, help give us confluence in regards to what to expect in relationship to that area of life dealing with the third house. Okay. If you need some more advice on karakas, please refer to the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology Volume 2. In the appendix, there's a whole list of karakas. We go through all the vargas, we go through all of the houses, and what the planets mean in relationship to those houses, those vargas, in relationship to karakas. Now we need to know that the signs and houses represent the environment of a particular area of life. What does that mean? Well, the 6th house will give us an understanding of our disease tendencies, our natural disease tendencies. What are we bringing into this world that's almost like, you can almost think of it as genetic. That's the environment that you're born into. Maybe you're born into a world where your mother smokes and your father's always working on a diesel engine, and so that's going to influence the environment of your health. That's just the natural environment. So that could be difficulties towards the 6th house. But let's say your 6th house lord is strong, which represents your own personal consciousness, which means that if your 6th house is strong, and you might be born into an environment with the mother smoking and the diesel fumes everywhere, but you have a natural inclination towards health. So as soon as you can, you start eating right, you start exercising. As soon as you can move out, you do. You start living in an environment that is supportive of you. That's when the house lord itself is strong, because that is your consciousness and how your consciousness is working. So the signs in the houses are the environment that you have, sort of what are you thrown into. The lord is how you act in regards to that environment. Now, we go over this in detail in the Astrological Principles 1, 2, and 3 MP3 courses, but consider this, think about it, and it'll become clear to you. So the planetary lords represent the consciousness behind the area of life in consideration, in the same way that, say, the second house, how you manage your resources. Well, again, maybe you have Jupiter and maybe you have Moon together in the second house, which is showing that that second house, your resources are strong. You're born into possibly an affluent situation. But let's say your second lord is debilitated or hemmed in by malefics or starved by many of its enemies. Well, that's going to show that although you were born into an affluent situation, it may be that your consciousness ruins it. You waste the money, or you don't know how to take care of your resources. So this is how we can see the difference between what you get and how do you act with it. Okay. Now, some other important points. The extent to which the house in question thrives is dependent on the state of planets represented by the influencing house. Now, what does this mean? Let's state it one more time. The extent to which the house thrives is dependent on the state of planets represented by the influencing house. So an easier way to put that is that the better the dignity of the house in question, the lord of the house in question, the better that house is going to thrive. So fourth lord, if that lord is in good dignity, is supported by benefics by its friends, then that fourth house itself is going to thrive. All right. If the 10th lord is supported by benefics, is supported by its friends, then the area of life represented by the 10th house is going to thrive. Now again, please refer back to the videos on the houses in the free Vedic Astrology course on this channel. So if you want to know what does the 10th house mean, go watch the video on the 10th house. If you want to know what the third house means, go watch the video on the third house. And if you can look at your chart and see, is the lord of this house in good dignity? Is it supported by its friends? How does it look through the Vargas? If it's all good, then that house is typically going to thrive during its dasha, and in general. Now, there's much more we could say. For example, about cusps, about Tajika aspects, even getting into the shadowy planets like Upagrahas. But for now, I would like you to focus on these particular themes that we've already discussed. Look at as many charts as you can, see how they work out, even matched up to the dashas if possible. A few more points I would like to go over deal with the severity of afflictions or advantages. When malefics influence a house, and it's not severe, I mean maybe they're weak malefics, then it can take time for that house to be destroyed. I mean maybe it breaks down as the years go by. If the 7th house, dealing with relationships, has some weak malefic influences impacting it, meaning the malefics aren't strong by avashtas or aren't strong by shadbala, these sorts of things, then that house will slowly break down over time. If there are weak benefics influencing a particular house, then that's going to tell us that that house is going to slowly, possibly slowly grow over time. But this again takes us back to that idea of how strong are the good and bad influences. Remember, they're going to be mixed, typically. And with time and with attention, the more charts that you look at, you will start to see how these play out. So it takes experience as well as just this theoretical knowledge. And you always have to remember that the karaka is just as important. Meaning, consider what the karakas are for each house. I've covered this in previous videos. You have to have confluence between the Lord, the influences on the house, the natural karaka, before you can get a full picture in regards to what is going to be going on within an area of life and within a particular person's dasha. The more confluence you get, the more certain you can be. Okay, I'm going to post some more things to consider on a blog post at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com. So when I post this video, I go to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, and you'll see, and I'll even put a link down here at the bottom of this video, you'll see a list of things to consider to help you get more details in regards to chart interpretation. You want to commit these to memory, you want to think about these. And as we move forward into the houses themselves, the first house, second house, you want to think about each of these points for each house. And that'll help you see, how is this dasha going to play out when I'm in the dasha of the third lord, when I'm in the dasha of the eighth lord, when I'm in the dasha of the ninth lord. I know what these houses represent. Now how can I start to apply these principles to that house? And that'll start to give you a very clear picture in regards to what to expect in a particular dasha you're looking at. Okay, so stay tuned, and the next video will deal with the first house and Sarvarta Chintamani's approach to understanding what the first house means and how to consider the influences through time dealing with the dashas. Thank you.